When researching the ancestry of descendants of enslaved Africans, it can be extremely difficult to find information on the family before 1870, and especially during the time that they were enslaved. In researching the family tree of Jabari Walker, we not only broke through that 1870 brick wall, but we were also able to connect Jabari to a unique community within a uniquely African American culture. Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and on today's video, we will be looking into Jabari Walker's ancestry from Liberty County, Georgia. Jabari Walker is the host of the YouTube channel From Nothing, which focuses on exploring the rich history of Africa with a focus on sub-Saharan African history. Jabari has briefly discussed his ancestry in his videos and has even done a few DNA test videos. Jabari has also taken a few more DNA tests in collaboration with Useful Charts and in conjunction with the research that I'm conducting into Jabari's family tree. So be sure to check out the video from Useful Charts going over Jabari's DNA test results and looking to determine the best DNA test for African Americans. The family tree that Jabari sent me was a really well-built family tree going back in a few lines to the 1800s. As I was looking through the lines, I decided to focus on the ancestry of Jabari's second great-grandmother, Annie Lee Quarterman. I wanted to trace her line as far back as possible, but my first goal was to take Annie Lee Quarterman's line back past the 1870 brick wall. Annie was born to Rosa Quarterman and an unknown father. Rosa was only a few months shy of turning 16 years old when Annie was born. Looking at the 1900 census, it shows Anne as an infant living with her mother, aunt, and grandparents, Gabe and Martha. Rosa would get married just a few years later to a man named Hardy King, and in the 1910 census we see that Rosa's father, Gabriel, is actually neighbors with Rosa and her husband Hardy. Annie is listed as Annalisa in her grandparents' house along with some other grandchildren of Gabriel and Martha, who were likely cousins of Anna and presumably children of Rosa's sister Retta. It is hard to decipher family relationships in this census due to the enumerator seeming to misidentify some of Hardy and Rosa's known children as their siblings, and then even listing them both as siblings. So while it may seem odd that Annalisa was living next door with her grandparents, the oddity may just be due to whatever caused the enumerator to write the families as they did. Or there might have been something else going on, especially with Anna having been born out of wedlock. Looking back at the 1900 census, there are a few things we can learn about Rosa's parents, Gabe and Martha. Born in the 1830s, it was likely that both had been born as slaves. This census also indicates that Gabriel and Martha were married for 33 years, so they were married around 1867. The census also indicates that they had a total of 9 children, but only 5 were still living at the point the census was taken. We also find the family in the 1880 census and in the 1870 census, but in the 1870 census there are a few odd things going on. Gabriel is using this surname Way instead of Quarterman, yet there is an Amanda Quarterman in the house. There is also an Amanda Quarterman who would be the same age listed in the 1880 census as Gabriel and Martha's daughter, so she may have been their daughter. But in the 1870 census, Amanda is also listed as mulatto, while both Gabriel and Martha are listed as black, indicating she might not have been their biological daughter, or was only a daughter of Gabriel or Martha, but not both. It may have also just been a mistake by the census enumerator, but hopefully further research will figure that out. So I started to look into the paper trail, and I focused on finding records of any Gabriel Quartermans or Gabriel Ways who lived in Liberty County. I was able to find lots of records, including tax records, land records, and even voting registration. I even double-checked myself and looked for other people around the same age in Liberty County named Gabriel Quarterman or Gabriel Way, but it only seemed to be the one person. So I felt confident in assuming these records all related to Jabari's 4th great-grandfather, Gabriel. There was a Gabriel Quarterman who lived in Jefferson County, Georgia, but he was 10 years younger than Jabari's ancestor, but I still needed to step lightly while researching. It seems Gabriel went by Gabriel Way until sometime in the 1870s, when he starts showing up as Gabriel Quarterman for the first time in tax registers for Liberty County. These tax registers give us a glimpse at how much property Gabriel owned, as well as how much his wife Martha owned, as she was also listed. Compared with the rest of the community, Gabriel and Martha seem to be on the lower end of property owned. Both also seem to deal mostly with livestock, although they acquired more property as time went on. There were a decent amount of other people with the surname Quarterman in these records, and it seemed likely that they might be family, or at the very least were connected in some way. Unfortunately, none of these documents broke that 1870 wall, but there were a few that did. On August 1st, 1867, Gabriel registered a vote under the name Gabriel Way, and to make it official, he used his mark, possibly indicating that he didn't know how to read or write. But now with the 1870 brick wall broken, we still needed to break through that Civil War brick wall and see if we can find anything on the family before 1865, and more importantly, during their time being enslaved. But we were up against a lot. The first difficulty was that Gabriel used both the name Quarterman and Way. A standard technique in African American genealogy research is using the family surname which was adopted after slavery as a way to possibly pinpoint the enslaver. This is because after emancipation, many former slaves would take the surnames of the families who had enslaved them. And most records that we can find during enslavement are records relating to the slave owners, which makes identifying the enslaving family a very important part of this research. And at this point, we could only guess why Gabriel had used both the name Way and Quarterman. The second difficulty was that we really didn't know a whole lot about Gabriel's life before the Civil War. Since records indicate Gabriel and Martha didn't marry until 1867, it's uncertain if they even knew each other before emancipation. Although it's certainly possible that they did know each other and were even married before emancipation, it's just that their marriage wasn't civilly recognized until 1867. Amanda Quarterman, the possible daughter of Gabriel and/or Martha, was born in 1863 and was at least related in some way since she would be living with them for years, but it's unknown exactly how she is related. So we wouldn't even know if she would be showing up with Gabriel or Martha or neither of them. But there was a piece of information that did allow us to overcome these difficulties. And in order to do that, we need to jump forward in time to Gabriel's death in 1922. On Gabriel's death certificate, we get a vital piece of information. Gabriel's father, Sharper Quarterman. Further research would show his father's name was actually Sharper Quarterman, but this piece helped us tie in so much more together. From here, I started to look into the history of Liberty County and quickly found the website They Had Names. This website was like a genealogy dream, all about records available as well as transcriptions of thousands of records. A search of the database turned up information on Gabriel and Sharper, as well as multiple other Quarterman relatives. So I decided to reach out to the person who ran the website, Stacy Ashmore Cole.
I'm Stacy Ashmore Cole. I research Liberty County, Georgia, but I'm not actually from Liberty County, Georgia. In fact, I never heard of it before 2017 when I started researching my family. Started researching as a hobby and really got into it, especially after I found out that my Liberty County ancestors were slave owners, and I started researching them and their history and wound up with a website called theyhadnames.net, which now has the names of over 37,000 African Americans enslaved and free in mostly antebellum Liberty County records. Liberty County is one of the oldest counties in Georgia. When the English province of Georgia was started in the 1730s, of course, slavery was illegal, and the European descended planters of South Carolina worked on that, and it took them about 15 years, and they finally got Georgia open to slavery. And that's essentially why Liberty County was populated the way it was. What happened is there were a group of planters who lived up near Charleston, and they got land grants and migrated to what was then 3 parishes, became Liberty County later. And they brought with them about 3 times their number in enslaved people. So a lot of The people whose ancestors were held in slavery in Liberty County, actually, their ancestors come from South Carolina. A few even come from the Caribbean. So, of course, the enslaved people were the ones who actually built these plantations. Because it's such a difficult, harsh climate, mosquitoes and snakes and alligators and all of that, a lot of the planter families didn't live full-time on the plantations. You could call them enslaved labor camps too, actually. What happened is they would leave, and they would leave a white overseer in charge, and that meant that because there was so little interaction in some places, the enslaved people were able to develop a very unique culture. You'll hear it called Geechee culture, Gullah Geechee culture, and Liberty County was part of that. Very much their own traditions, their own ways of worshiping, their own ways of living. But one of the centers of the community is something that actually Gabriel Quarterman/Way was involved with, and that was the church, because that was what the Planter Society built their community around. It was called the Midway Congregational Church. But what I actually discovered in my research is that from its beginning in its records in 1754, there were African American members. They were full members of the church. They were admitted the same way that the white members were, though obviously they did not have the same privileges or any sense of power within the church. But I have developed from the records a list of over 1,100 people, African Americans, enslaved and free, who were members of the church.
Stacy had already researched a man named Mingo Quarterman, whose name I remembered from the tax records, often listed near Gabriel, so likely Gabriel's brother or at least a half-brother.
We are so fortunate because he put in a petition for the U.S. Southern Claims Commission, which was established by Congress in 1873, to compensate people who had property taken by U.S. soldiers. And many enslaved people, formerly enslaved people in Liberty County, put in those petitions. Sherman's army, after they reached Savannah, they sent a raiding party into Liberty County, which was a wealthy planting community, and they basically took everything from everybody, black or white. So that meant when the Southern Claims Commission was established after the Civil War to compensate people who had lost property to the federal soldiers, there were actually a lot of formerly enslaved people from Liberty County, more than 80, who submitted claims. There were 3 special commissioners in order. One was Virgil Hillier, who was a carpetbagger from the north. The second was Henry Way, who was a former slave owner in Liberty County. The third special commissioner was my second great uncle, J. Sloman Ashmore, but he was only in that position briefly, so only did a couple of claims. Mingo Quarterman happened to get the second special commissioner. The testimonies that he took are very sparse. They're very suspiciously similar sounding. So while this claim provided great details, unfortunately, it didn't provide the rich texture that the ones taken by Virgil Hillier did. He put in for $544 for things like hogs and honey, the standard things that a formerly enslaved person in Liberty County might have been able to earn if they were allowed time after their day was done to raise their own stock, raise their own crops, things like that, which was a kind of a coastal Georgia thing. It was called the task system. His claim was denied because the commission didn't feel that there was enough detail to prove that he had actually owned the property. The commission had a great deal of difficulty understanding the system in Liberty County and that formerly enslaved people could actually own property. So they did deny a number of claims for that reason. Mingo's claim, while it doesn't provide all the details that we would like, it still does tell us that he was enslaved on the plantation of John Bernard, and it gives the names of a number of witnesses. The petitioners had to have witnesses, and so we can research those names, and you can see them all living around each other in the 1870 census. And so I had that hypothesis that Gabriel and Mingo were brothers, and that of course would tell me quite a bit more about how to prove that. And the best way to do that, but not the easiest way, is to go back to estate inventories from before the Civil War. And I was fortunate that I found Nellie, their mother, in an estate inventory with Mingo and Gabriel listed after her. And they were not identified as a family unit, but I have found in a number of Liberty County estate inventories that enslaved families are listed in family order. And you can tell that by, I hate to put it this way, but by finding an enslaved woman, and then after her will be her children. They're in order by value. And if you keep seeing that happen over and over, you think, okay, this estate inventory put people in family order. Well, you had actually found the Freedmen's Bank record that showed Sam Quarterman had established an account. And we're so fortunate that the Freedmen's Bank account records required the depositor to list their family, including parents and siblings. And Sam Quarterman listed Sharper Quarterman, which actually made me worry that I wasn't going to be able to pull this research together, because I could not make Sam Quarterman the brother of Gabriel Way / Quarterman. What that established, though, was that Sharper Quarterman had another family before emancipation. The mother's name was Nanny, and Sam was one of the children. So knowing that, I was able to go back and find a deed record in which the John Lambert estate sold Nanny, Sam, and his siblings to William S. Fleming in 1840. And the John Lambert estate is really a fascinating story, because he died in the late 1700s, and he willed that his estate, including his enslaved people, be held together, and that the profits from the plantation and the enslaved people go to charity. They held it together for many years, but in the 1840s they sold off the enslaved people. But the foundation still exists. They put the profits back into the foundation, and in fact that foundation still endows nonprofit institutions in Liberty County today. It's held together all that time.
One thing Stacy also explained to me was that the Liberty County community was extremely unique and had a fascinating history. She suggested I get in touch with Donald Lovett, who knew a lot about the community and is currently serving as chairman of the Liberty County Board of Commissioners. So we got in touch, and he described the amazing history of Liberty County.
Right. My name is Donald Lovett. I'm a native of Liberty County, Georgia. A lot of people know me by my political affiliation, which I serve as the chairman of the Liberty County Board of Commissioners here in Liberty County. I'm also a playwright. I have been featured in Georgia Trend magazine for intertwining playwriting with telling the unsung heroes, stories of unsung heroes in Liberty County. The African-American population in Liberty County came here through South Carolina. When General Oglethorpe came to Georgia, he did not want Georgia to be a slave state. He said no, and then he through pressure from landowners who were being granted land in Liberty County, they kept pushing the issue that they needed slaves to help to clear the land and develop the farmland and so on and so forth. So finally, he gave in and allowed slavery to come to Georgia from South Carolina. Liberty County was settled by Puritan population. And those Puritans came here through England, of course, through the Northeast, Boston, all the way down the East Coast, settled in South Carolina, stayed there for a while, and once again, they came here. So a lot of the same names you would find in the Charleston area are in Liberty County, names of cities and locations as well as surnames. But one thing I like about the Puritans that I've discovered is that those people, as my grandma would say, they didn't just talk their religion, they walked their religion. So slavery, as I found out, and people can argue that point, was not as, I hate to use the word horrific, but that's where it comes about. Slavery was done on a much more humane level in Liberty County than it was in some other areas, especially when it talks about the South. So that's kind of how the African-American population came into Liberty County.
Donald Stacy also explained to me how Liberty County was not only a community amongst a unique culture, but it was even a unique community within that unique culture. What do you think makes Liberty County such a unique place?
Well, I certainly think the Puritan settlers do, no doubt about that. Once again, they were very close to being devout with their religion. Even in Liberty County, Reverend C.C. Jones, a Congregationalist minister, was allowed to teach religion on plantations here in South Carolina and in Georgia, especially in the Liberty County area, which didn't happen in a lot of places. That makes it unique. During the summer months, the plantation owners would come inland to the higher ground and leave the slaves with the overseer, to do the work on the plantations. So the slaves were able to build around a kind of a subculture. Like I did a play several years ago, it's called Come Sundown. And that title came from the fact that the slave time for the master was from dusk to dawn. After dusk, then the slave could have his or her own time. Basically, the slaves were left alone during the summer months. So they were able then to have their own time to develop their own culture, to maintain their own culture. You know, this is a Geechee Gullah territory, so a lot of that culture still survives today. And them being able to devise and maintain their own culture makes Liberty County different even today. A lot of land at that time was considered, because it was swampy, you know, rice fields, you know. After the Civil War plantation owners said, well, we don't want it, we'll just sell it or give it away. So the blacks were able to purchase, you know, bits of land here and there, and they sold it to their family members. And so they kept progressing that way. So when W.E. Du Bois came, 1870 something, he was surprised to find how much land the blacks owned. He said, nowhere have I seen this much land ownership among blacks in all the South than Liberty County, Georgia. So I'm from a people who are, oh my gosh, who are a special group of people. Special county, Liberty County, a county not named for a man, but named for the fight for freedom. So all that works together to make us who we are here in Liberty County, and we're just proud. Once again, we're Liberty County proud. Liberty County proud.
And because Stacy had already spent years doing in-depth research into the community of Liberty County, she had a lot of insight into Gabriel's likely connections with others in the community, and even why he used both the surname Way and Quarterman, which gave a clue as to Sharper Quarterman's possible father.
Because this group of white planters who moved from the same area in South Carolina to one area in Liberty County, the Midway area, they were all, of course, interrelated before they even got to Liberty County. The Ways and the Quartermans were very prominent families. In fact, the Way family is the only family that can be for certain said to have come from the original group that migrated to Dorchester, South Carolina, which actually came from Dorchester, Massachusetts. There was a group of Puritans up there who in the late 1600s all migrated together. Because Gabriel took the name Way at one point and Quarterman at the other, I was expecting to find him in one of the estate inventories for either family. Many formerly enslaved people in Liberty County did not take the name of their last enslaver. In fact, it looks like only about 10% did. So oftentimes the name someone took at emancipation almost led back like trying to create a family tree to an early enslaver of their family. But it has seemed to me like particularly the Quartermans, if you find those are actually probably the last enslaver. But in this case, it didn't turn out to be. In fact, Gabriel Way/Quarterman was held in slavery on John Bernard's plantation with his mother. Sharper Quarterman's other family was on the William B. Fleming plantation, and I couldn't find any Quarterman or Way connection, say, coming in through marriage. But it looks to me like Sharper Quarterman had a connection, either a biological relationship or some other connection with the Sharper who, as an enslaved man, was one of the few African-American preachers for the Midway Congregational Church in the very early times in the early 1800s. And he was owned by a Mrs. Quarterman. So I think that this is a case where actually the surname taken at emancipation points back to the very early history of the family.
I was reading and found out Sharper, who was one enslaved, his funeral was held on the church grounds of the White Midway Congregational Church, on the church grounds. And it said that blacks and whites from all over came to his funeral. And it says his son carried him away to his burial ground. And I thought, what kind of man is this that they would have his funeral on the grounds of the White Congregational Church? And found out later he had been ordained. They give him credit for being the colored congregational minister.
This Sharper, who we presume to be Gabriel's paternal grandfather, was also connected to another well-known figure from Liberty County, who Donald had actually been actively researching.
And so from his lineage, then his grandson, William A. Golden, who's related to the Quarterman that you mentioned earlier, worked diligently to buy land and donate some of that land to start a small school, one of the first schools for African Americans, definitely in the South. Started right here in Liberty County, Georgia. A school that was called Golden Grove, a little community in the Midway, Georgia area. So they built that school, so it became what the blacks called the College of Liberty County. When you hear about Quarterman and Golden, and you put those two together, that's an awesome fit. So Jabari has great roots.
And using all of the information compiled, Matt Baker of Useful Charts created a tree showing Sharper's likely family tree along with Jabari's connection. I decided to look at Jabari's DNA matches to see if I could identify matches that connected to the Quarterman family. Unfortunately, I was unable to find any connections with him and his DNA matches connecting to other parts of the Quarterman tree, but I was able to find multiple distant matches who had the Quarterman name in their family tree, as well as other matches who also listed Liberty County amongst their ancestral areas. But if you want to see more about all of Jabari's DNA test results, be sure to check out this video from Useful Charts. And if you want to see more videos like mine, be sure to click right here. Thank you to my patrons and YouTube members.